Is college a scam? Well, that all depends. See, when I went to law school, that's what they taught me the right answer was, because it depends upon what you're going to pay me to tell you and tell the other side and tell the judge and tell the jury. But it's going to depend upon how you do, what you do. Do you finish? Do you do a lot of things? What you're planning to do? Where do you want to accomplish? Brian, I'm going to let you start off and give the answers to all those many questions about it depends.
Yeah, that's actually a great answer, and I agree with that. So it all depends. But I think it really does, and it's not to say that basically college is a scam or anything like that, but I think for a lot of people, not necessarily a scam, but maybe a bad idea, because it used to be decades ago that that was kind of the American dream, was to, whether you start your own business or go to college and learn some skills, you could hop out of college with a high paying job and you'd be set and blah, blah, blah. And I think that's not always the case now. And a lot of people aren't really thinking through the numbers. If your goal is to go to college and the kind of job that you want to go into is something that pays, let's say, $40,000 a year, do you want to go, $200,000 into debt at some elite school to get a $40,000 a year job? If I said, hey, would you like to work at McDonald's as a manager, and I'll train you for 4 years so you can be a manager, and you pay me $200,000, and then I'll probably get you a job as a manager for $40,000. Would you laugh at me, or would you be like, that sounds like an awesome deal, great? You'd probably laugh at me and you'd probably say, hey, you're trying to scam me out of money. But that's what a lot of people do. They get into a ton of debt and they go into a job where, there's really not that high of a cap of like how much they can make. Or, I should say that the cap is kind of quite low, what they can make there. And, if you're training to be a doctor or, or some kind of surgeon where, you might make $300,000 a year, is it maybe worth it to go, $100,000 or $200,000 into debt? Maybe, because you have a way of paying that off. You have an opportunity where, hey, if you can get a job that pays $300,000 in 8 years' time, that might not be too bad of a deal right there. But at the same time, if you had to choose between let's say, an elite school where you might be $500,000 in debt, or, a basic school where you might only be $80,000 or $100,000 in debt, you have to realize at the end of the day, you'll still have probably the same degree. You can still be the same doctor, but in one case, you might be $500,000 in debt, and in another case be, $100,000 in debt right there. So I think you have to be kind of smart about that right there and see, does the money make sense? If you have to take out a loan, does it make sense relative to what you could make? And having said that, there's plenty of jobs that with a 1 to 2 year degree, you can make $100,000 or more on. I know a lot of people that have gone to school for, 6 years plus, even 8 years, that don't make that. Like, if you can go to a lot of tech colleges and stuff like that, where you can be like an electrician, a plumber, a mechanic, where oftentimes there's literally jobs almost lined up and you can make a ton of money. I actually, a few years back, I had an issue with a car of mine, and I dropped it off, and the owner of the place basically offered to give me a ride home because he said it would be like several hours there, which, initially I thought it'd be like, a 15-minute thing, but no. So he offered to give me a ride back, and we were basically chit-chatting, and he was going on and on and on about how there's a huge demand for mechanics. And he was saying how there's I think it's 2-year program, I think. I could be wrong. It may have been 1 year, but I want to say it was 2 at a tech college. And he was saying that before the end of the first year, so of this program, before they were halfway through, there were places trying to compete to hire them the second they were done, including ones that would reimburse them, their, education costs, including ones where he was saying, you could make 120 grand plus easy right out of the bat right there. And there was, people competing for you even hours away, because that's how in demand that was. Now, at the same time, I know plenty of people that would go, to basically college for, 4 to 8 years, and they'd walk off with a job that would pay 40 or 50,000, in some cases less, in some cases 30,000. And in a lot of cases, they didn't necessarily even need the degree to do that, or there's nothing that the degree actually taught them get the job or to help with that right there. So I really think a lot of students these days really need to think through and say, hey, what is the kind of job that I want? What is the kind of income that makes? Am I okay with that? And does it make sense to go into debt for whatever amount of money to do that? Now, if you have parents that, are basically paying for college, great, but you should still look through and think, hey, do I want to waste, 4 or 6 years or 8 years of my life to, get this job that pays far less than what I really want. If it's a job that you love and pays what you want, absolutely great. Now, I'm basically paying for my own daughter's college, but I still try to really hit her hard on like, hey, you want to look at several different job types, see what interests you, and, see, hey, what do those pay? Does it pay a good amount that you'd be happy with? Or is it something that might be like, a $35,000 a year job where you don't want to make just that? So, maybe look at something else that you enjoy just as much or more that might pay a bit more. So, I think you still want to think through that stuff, but especially if you have to go into any kind of debt, especially big debt, really, really, really think through that, because the last thing you want is to basically come out with like a $40,000 a year job and be $200,000 in debt, but have a fancy degree that you can show off on your wall, which literally doesn't mean much for a lot of people. Because, this is the last one before I basically turn over to Sean here on this. When I was in high school, I briefly basically did some online work helping like a job recruiter, like a headhunter, where I would get paid like $1,000, which was a lot more at the time, per resume that I found that got past the first initial interview. And the number one thing that the main headhunter said is that he could care less about where the degree was from. If there was a degree requirement, all he cared about was that you had one. Didn't care what the GPA was, didn't care what the college was, didn't care if it was an elite one, didn't care if you paid $500,000 for it, or if you paid $50,000, or if you paid $25,000, just cared that you had it. And I think that's, with the exception of a handful of jobs, that's kind of the norm now, and you just got to do what makes sense. So Sean, basically turn it over to you. I know you've had a few kids through college and whatnot, and you've also been through a law degree, which is a little longer than most, so you can talk a bit about how that basically prepared you and what you think of all that.
I'm glad to. So yes, I've been through it myself, got kids that have gone through it, and not too long from now have grandkids that go through it. And you've made a lot of good points about the money part, but the other thing that I think people are thinking about college or going back to college, if they've finished or not finished and want to do more, is what's your real goal that you want to end up doing? It's partly about money, but it's also about, can you at least put up with the job that you have? The truth is that most people that go to college for whatever degree, in the end, work their way into doing something different. If you start asking people, that are in their 40s, for example, or 50s or 60s, what did you study and what did you learn and what do you do now? You're going to find what they do now is different for many reasons. In many cases, because what they thought they wanted to do when they started, they didn't want to do when they were done, right? We all want to have self-satisfaction, right, with the thing that we're learning and the thing that we're ending up doing. But we often, when we're younger, don't know what that is, and we really don't know what it is until we try stuff. Now, I took a really long and winding road to get to be a lawyer. You meet those kids that are like 16-year-olds like, I'm going to be a lawyer, right? That was not me. My dad worked for IBM. He was a computer programmer, and he always complained about how the engineers that worked at IBM and the computer programmers, they were like, they never communicated well. So I said, I should learn about computer programming and become an engineer, and then, I'll be able to go work for IBM and get the best of all this. So I graduated high school. I started off college in my local community college, and that had a feeder program to go into Cornell University, where I would get my final, certificate, my diploma in engineering. And I went my first year and was taking computer classes, which were absolutely fun, and I destroyed those. But I also had to take things like calculus. Those of you who've ever taken a college level calculus, what a ridiculous, stupid, horrible thing to put your brain through. And I can still in my mind picture the guy who was the professor who would start solving some equation, and he'd start on this wall over here, and he'd write all over the blackboard. They used to have these thing called blackboards back in the day, and they used chalk. You young kids might not know about this, but he'd go down the whole wall of the classroom, all the way across the front of the classroom, get on the third wall over here, still working, solving the same equation, and go, oh, that's not right. And then he'd erase like an entire board. I'm like, okay, and I'm supposed to do this. So I really didn't like what I was studying, and I discovered people making money in different businesses. And one of them that I was working for selling vacuum cleaners on the side, and discovered that these guys were complete idiots, and they made a ton of money. And they drove nice cars, and they lived in great houses. I was like, I need to go make money. I don't even need to go to college. My dad's like, no, you need to go to college. So I switched colleges and started studying business. And when I started studying business, the first thing that you get into in business classes are macroeconomics, like the big business, trends and everything else. And I was like, this is boring. I really wanted the part where I make money, because that's the only part I cared about. And at the same time, I had discovered the world of radio broadcasting and audio production. I didn't really ever get into video production at the time. And I got to know the guy who was building the radio station on our campus at the University of Scranton. And so I switched majors yet again to communications. And by the time I was a junior in high school and college, I was working as a disc jockey at the local rock station. And in fact, I worked full time as a disc jockey in my senior year. I worked midnight to 6, midnight to 7, something like that. I can't remember, maybe midnight to 6, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday in my senior year. And yes, I missed a lot of early classes. In fact, I probably missed a lot of late classes and had a blast. Great job. What a wonderful thing. But as I got towards graduation, I started to look at the money in the industry and discovered that, I didn't make a lot of money, but I was going to college. Then I discovered what my boss made and my boss's boss. And at the time, this would have been in 1981, Imus in the Morning in New York was the #1 highest paid disc jockey in the world. And he had just signed, it was in, I think it's like Radio and Records was the industry journal at the time. Big headline, Imus in the Morning was going to make $100,000 a year. Highest paid guy doing this. Okay, this is long before the era of someone like Howard Stern making literally millions and millions of dollars a year, right? So you look at it and you say, hey, the best guy in the industry makes $100,000 and you're not him. And I'm never going to be him. So I'm like, oh man, what am I going to do? And generally speaking, and maybe it's still true that many people, when they don't know what to do and they get out of college, they're like, I don't know what to do, either go to law school or go get an MBA, which I should have. But I went to law school, and not because I really wanted to be a lawyer or do anything specific, but I was off wandering, and hopefully you're going to learn something from all this. And I got out of law school eventually in 3 years and graduated and passed the bar and started practicing law. And a couple of things happened as I started to get out of law school that you need to visualize, because these are things you need to think about before you get there, which is, what are you going to do with a law degree, right? So you can go to work for a big company and work in their law department. You can go to work for a big law firm. And you guys have seen those people in the movies, right? The people that, they go to work when it's dark. They never leave their office. They're still there when it's dark, and they go home when it's dark because you're an associate. And until you become a higher level or a partner, you're basically a slave in these firms. And if you make it to partner, you can make a lot of money, but you are just an absolute slave peon until then. And maybe it's a little bit better now, but I doubt it. It certainly wasn't then. And I was like, okay, that's not me, because I discovered somewhere in all of this that I really didn't like people to tell me what to do, which doesn't make for a good employee, right? But I didn't want to do that. And I got out of law school, started working for a smaller firm, and some great people, and learned the ropes and found out really that practicing law was not all that much fun. Because who comes to a lawyer? Well, let's see. I got hurt. Somebody died. I'm getting divorced. I got sued, right? I mean, most of the people that come to you, they're people with problems. This is like very sad, very negative, terrible. It was not any fun at all. But then I morphed back into the business world and learned marketing and selling and, seminars and presentations and eventually the internet, and figured, some things that I enjoyed doing, which I do now, and, probably use my communications degree way more, if anything, what I learned. But I took this long and winding path, and stumbled around, which is, I think, really typical of people. And so I think that as you try to figure out what you want to do, you got to kind of try to imagine that path in your mind before you get there as much as you can, because you could save a lot of years, you could save hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? And you could be happier if you can figure it out faster where you want to be. Many, many people have jobs that they hate, and they're in them because they don't have another choice of where they want to be and don't know how to transition from where they are now to where they want to be. A lot of people that have high-paying jobs, like lawyers, now in our business, I've dealt with lots of lawyers. Some that work for us, some that just we're doing different deals with, and it's extremely common, more often than not, that they will ask me, "How did you get out of practicing law?" Because they don't want to be practicing law. They're smart, hardworking, highly educated, don't want to be doing what they're doing. Whatever they're getting paid, it's not enough for them to be happy doing it, despite everything they did to go and become that. So what is it that you want to do? Because if you want to be a lawyer, college is not a scam. College is a requirement. You want to be a doctor, and I hope there's a lot of smart, hardworking people that still want to be doctors, because I keep getting older and keep needing more doctors. And I need you smart people to go out there and become them so that, you can keep me alive and healthy, right? So that's all got to happen. But for many of you, it's not the answer. And if you started and didn't finish, going back is not necessarily the answer to get where you want to be, because you're not sure where you want to be. More education is not always better. Now, if you can, like Brian mentioned, there are cases where you can actually get companies to pay for your education, which is really awesome for those of you that want more. A lot of big, like Fortune 500 companies, you got to work for them. They will pay for your education if you go and get more that would benefit them when you learn more as an employee. Like you get an MBA or you get another advanced degree, for example, or even a friend of mine that works for the hospital system in Orlando, Florida, who got her GED and then went to college and got her accounting degree, and she was working in the accounting and intake department and everything else, and they've covered her costs, and then they're going to actually rehire her at a much higher rate because she did that. So hey, that's a great use of college, and therefore it's not a scam. So we've taken, I don't know how long, but maybe close to 20 minutes to tell you it depends, right, Brian?
Yep, it depends.
So there you go. So hopefully you've figured out some things from this and can take our life experiences and have an idea of how to figure this out for yourself, because it is personal. It's not that all college is bad or that all college is good, but it's a means to an end. It used to be you couldn't get a great high-paying job without it, maybe, or the best jobs went to the college educated, but no longer the case, especially as the world keeps changing and technology keeps changing. So figure this out for yourself, and I hope that your choice works for you and is very, satisfying for yourself in how that it turns out. Good luck.